Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new series that I am launching. And this series is a very special series called Expert Interviews with Ken. This is a series where I basically interview other people who are experts in their own fields, whatever their profession is, and we get a chance to hear their story and what it is they're doing for people. So with that, let's dive into today's guest on Expert Interviews with Ken. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Expert Interviews with Ken. And today I have special guest, Kaitlyn, and she is the author of I Don't Want to Die Anymore. And she is a poet gaining momentum performing around the Puget Sound region. Her newest poetry book is You Will Not Break, and her podcast is Recovery Isn't Linear. These are both set to launch in 2025, so that is this year, and Kaitlyn credits the start of her poetry career to performing at the Drunken Owl in 2024. So welcome, Kaitlyn. I would love to unpack your entire story and all that there is to unpack with that. How did you get into this? Why? And all this other stuff. And also, I'd like you to talk about that performance at the Drunken Owl. I'm kind of curious, plus the name there, Drunken Owl. Like, that's kind of curious. But so welcome, and let's unpack that.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Where do you want to start?
Start at the beginning, your story. Let's go.
Okay. So my story really begins. I found myself on the edge of a cliff. Um, and there were a number of reasons why that happened. I felt alone.
Mm.
I was severely depressed. I thought things would never get better, but there were three reasons that I can really think of when I'm thinking of why I ended up there. And number one is I lost my grandfather, and that was a significant loss in my life, probably the biggest loss I had to deal with. Number two, I found a job that I thought was really good for me. And it turned out it ended up sucking the life out of me.
Mm.
I gave my all to it, and it didn't give me much in return. And number three, I was in mental health treatment. And as my podcast says, recovery isn't linear.
Mm.
I found that my struggle kind of twist and turned before I found the light. And unfortunately, one of those turns found myself on the edge of a cliff. Um, and there were a number of people that saved my life that day. And so that's kind of where I start my story, because that's the start of my recovery journey, is up on that cliff's edge. Um,
An
so
actual cliff's edge, or is that
an actual
figurative?
cliff's edge.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was on the top of a mountain. It was pretty accessible, unfortunately. Um, and my friends and family members came to the rescue that day. They put their all into saving me. They called me numerous times. They left me voicemails. I found out later that my brother hopped in his car right away and sped up. It was about a 2-hour drive from where he was.
Mm.
And he sped as fast as he could to get to me. They tracked down my location and found out that I was at a casino because I had to stop to use the restroom nearby, and called the local police in that area to track down my location even further. Um, and so those are the people that I credit to saving me first.
Mm.
Those are the people that came to the rescue, that put their everything into saving me, and I truly cannot repay them in the way that I would like to. I repay them by simply living my life every single day to the best of my ability. Um, and I hope that's enough. But the second person is Officer Jay Wilson from Skagit County Police, who showed up with two other officers. I kind of just knew that it was for me without knowing how they found me. Um, and she really talked me off of that edge. She allowed me to tell my story to her. She joked with me. She made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Um, and gave me the sense that I needed to do something. I needed to act in that moment, and that the act wasn't jumping. It was going with her to the hospital. Um, and so I walked after countless countless minutes. It was probably a 10 to 15 minute conversation. Um, I walked with her to the police car and we drove to the hospital.
Hmm.
But the third thing that really saved me was after the hospital was put into mandatory treatment, and I found myself in a place that wasn't good for me. I think that a lot of mental health places can be really, really positive, but unfortunately, there are some that aren't great, and we need some work in those areas.
Hmm.
And so I'm a huge advocate of making sure that all mental health facilities are super supportive and super welcoming and super comforting to all that they serve. Um, and I learned that I had to advocate for myself. I I wrote down with a marker because I wasn't allowed anything else, um, and a piece of paper that they gave me, a huge list of everything that I thought I needed to advocate for my treatment. They saw that and said, okay, she does want to be here. She does want to get better. Um, and I advocated to go somewhere else, somewhere that I knew was going to support me, somewhere that I knew was going to benefit me. And they transferred me over there. And that's where I found my poetry. I really found myself in this rut where I didn't know what to do. I knew that I wanted to get better, but I knew that the things that I was doing previously weren't going to be good enough. I needed another outlet. And so my poetry kind of came into play where I had heard of poetry before. I knew that people wrote poetry to kind of help them with their thoughts, and I just wanted to get something out on paper. And so I started journaling. I started writing down my feelings. It was a free poetry write where there wasn't any rhymes. It was just
Hmm.
my thoughts. Um, and it allowed me to get everything out of my body, to allow the emotions to come out in a safe space. It allowed me to take what I had written and then reflect on that later, both in the moment right then and there, well later in the future. Um, and it allowed me to cope with all of these things. And through poetry, I figured out why I had gotten into that place in the first place,
Hmm.
why the loss of my grandfather was such a catastrophic event in my life, why that job wasn't good for me. I found my worth in poetry. I found my value in poetry by simply writing down thoughts of, man, I'm better than that job. Um, I figured out my mental health treatment. I advocated for myself via poetry. And so really that's in a nutshell my story, but I'm happy to get into it further. Um, and that's kind of where my story goes from there.
So the question that I have, so you are on an actual
Yeah.
cliff, but you were found at a casino. Fill that in because I'm kind of missing pieces. Like, how did you, why did you leave the cliff and go to a casino? What was going on in between there? Because that doesn't make sense. So if you were on the cliff ready to jump and take your life, uh, why did you leave and go to a casino? What happened?
Th Thank you for asking that because I didn't. I went to a casino first,
Okay.
before I went to the cliff. drove, I was supposed to go to treatment that day. And instead of going to treatment, I actually skipped it. I
Mm.
didn't tell any of my friends and family where I was going. I did give three of them a goodbye message that prompted the whole scenario.
Ah.
Um, and I drove straight north from where I lived. It was about a 2 hour drive. I did have to stop in a casino to go use the restroom, which is how they tracked me down because the casino had security footage. And then from there, the cliff's edge was about 10 minutes away. And that's where the police found me.
Wow. Wow. I'm glad you filled that in because I was kind of like going,
Yeah.
wait. um, Now this Don't Want to Die Anymore. So this book
Mhm.
that you wrote, Don't Want to Die Anymore. Tell a little bit about that because that is definitely an intriguing title. I don't want to die anymore. So tell the audience a little bit more about that book.
Yeah. So that book is a culmination of my treatment. Um, there are three parts to that book. There are kind of a more sad, it starts out with some really sad poetry. Um, that was in the very beginning stages of my treatment journey,
Hmm.
um, where I just, I felt lost. I felt sad. I was depressed and I didn't know how best to cope with those emotions. And so my poetry is what helped me. And it shows through in the poems that you read in that first section. And then in the second section, I learned that I was discovering myself. I was discovering who I was because after such a huge, huge life event where, friends and family are saving you after you being your brain after you're put back into the hospital again, um, it really causes you to think, who am I? What's my
Mm-hmm.
purpose? And so the second section is really me finding that purpose. It's me finding my value and my worth. And then the third section is where that title comes into play because after those poems, it took it took a couple of months, but it was this point in my life where I realized, oh my gosh, I've put in the work, I've put in the effort, and I don't want to die anymore.
Hmm.
Because it didn't start out that way. I did walk off the cliff's edge with the police officer, but I got into treatment and I still was like, I'm just so sad. And I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live. And so it got to this point where I didn't want to die anymore. I wanted to live. I wanted to be here. I knew that I had a purpose, even if I didn't know what it was yet. And it brought me so much joy to feel that way when I realized, hey, I want to be here and I want to fight,
Hmm.
that I knew I had to create a book about that. And I got so many comments on that book about, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I Somebody else has gone through this. Somebody else feels those emotions and they
Right.
connected with me, but they also connected with this idea that, there is something worth fighting for and there is a life ahead of you, even if you don't know what it is yet. Um, and so that book is so precious to me, because it really just details my journey through treatment and through recovery. And I think that it created something really beautiful.
That sounds like a an absolute amazing book that just takes people through that whole journey. And it sounds like that book is full of a lot of emotions, a lot of ups and downs as well. So that book sounds amazing. How if I may ask, how many pages is that book? I'm just wondering how long it is.
It's a poetry book, so it's only somewhere around 50. It's a short read, um, but
Uh,
it's packed
that's
with
actually
emotion.
yeah, that's actually a pretty decent size, especially that's your first book.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's actually a decent size for a first book. Now, you also have a secondary book called You Will Not Break. Tell us about that one.
Yeah. So the secondary book is kind
And
of a deluxe edition. Go
before you
ahead.
get in that, I might add the title. So you've got the first title, Don't Want to Die Anymore, which is powerful in itself. But now we take the second title here to a whole nother level. You Will Not Break. That just sounds so empowering. Anyhow, continue.
Yeah. And that was my purpose in titling that book. Um, was I took some of the poems from the first book, and it's been a year or two um, since that attempt. And so I really took some of those poems from the first book and I kept them the same. There's about 7 poems that I didn't touch, that I left as is, as an ode to the time that I was in,
Mm,
because I felt like it was really important to recognize where I came from. And then there's poems that I took and I rewrote them for a couple of reasons. One was my poetry journey had changed. I have been writing poetry for a couple years now, and so my poetry today is drastically different than it was when I first started. I've learned tools, I've learned ways to write poetry, I've learned different styles of poetry. And so I wanted to reflect that in the book, but also my mental health has changed since then. I am in a much better place. I
mm,
am fighting for my life. I am doing hobbies that I never used to do before. I found my purpose and my passion. And that is giving to others and giving back to the world and
mm,
creating a community for people, especially people that are struggling with mental health. And I wanted to write poems that reflected that. And so I took some of the poems that I had written before and I rewrote them, usually to have a happier ending, because oftentimes they didn't have a happy ending. And so I felt like I wanted to give people some hope that even
mm.
if they start sad, they can have a happy ending.
Right.
And then there are poems that haven't graced the page yet. So there are poems that nobody has seen. I've performed a couple of them locally, but they haven't been seen to the public eye. And those are poems that really helped me shape the title of the book. That's where the title of the book came from, was one of my poems is called You Will Not Break. And it's this idea of those tabletop games of you ripping the tablecloth out from some under something glass. And those that are really skilled at it, the glass just stays put and it doesn't break. Something that is so fragile can stay put and not break. And that thought came to me and I was like, I have to write a poem about this because I feel like I I can be really fragile at times. But with the skill set and the tools to cope through all of the emotions and to cope through all that life throws my way, I'm not going to break. I may go through some changes. I may go through some hard times, but I'm not going to break anymore. I'm going to stay put.
Mm.
And so that's kind of where that book came from.
So amazing, so powerful. Now, the next question I have for you is tell me about this drunken owl in 2024. I'd really like to hear the story behind that. Just be
Yeah.
plus because it's like the name. Was that a pub? Was that a bar? What was that?
Drunken Owl is this incredible theater performance put on by a man called named Kevin Finney,
Okay.
who brings together in the Seattle area. He brings together a group of poets, of actors and actresses. Um, he brings together playwrights that are local to the area,
Hmm.
and musicians. Oftentimes, his own band plays. I think they're called the Bard Owls. Um, and they just put on a fantastic performance. I saw this performance through a friend of mine named Monique Preston, who is an actress in the Seattle area. Um, and I was just getting into my poetry at the time, and I thought, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to perform my poetry for people to see? And so I reached out to him And Kevin came back and said, absolutely, let's have you be on the stage. And that's really where my poetry took off, was being able to perform my poetry. I got feedback from him on the best ways to perform, how I can connect with the audience even better. And I that's why I always say I credit the start of my poetry to career to him, because I was able to perform professionally,
Hmm.
to a group of people, and I've gained so many just amazing, incredible experiences. The last one was in January for a show called Don't Limit Women, and it was a cast of all women and non-binary people, and it was just fantastic. The group of people that I was with were incredible and so supportive. I got so much praise on my poetry, and I felt like the poetry was really connecting with the people that I was there to perform for. Um, and so I've absolutely loved, they're in a little saloon. Um, and I've absolutely loved performing for them. I think that everybody should check out a show if they have a chance to.
Fascinating, fascinating. So the Drunken Owl was it's so it's not even a restaurant or a place like that. It's a performance place.
Hmm. Yeah, they put on performances in a saloon.
What a name. I love that. That is just such a cool, unique name. That's awesome. Now, here's another question that I have. So
Hmm.
there's a difference between writing poetry for personal healing and then there's actually, what's the difference between writing poetry for personal healing versus sharing it with others?
That's a really good question. There is, it's a difference in how you are thinking about it. So it's a difference in mindset. The writing poetry for personal healing really, it's just kind of getting your thoughts out on the page.
Hmm,
There isn't anybody else in mind. It's just, how is this going to benefit me in the moment? What do I need? And is that a brainstorm session where I literally just get everything I can think of and I put it down on paper? Is that I want to kind of craft something really beautiful? And so I'm going to be a little bit more strategic about it. Either way, you're doing it for yourself.
right.
Um, and and then performing it, there is a difference where I've taken something that I've written typically for myself, um, where I'm really crafting the story of personal healing, and I'm thinking of how I can best heal in that moment. And I take that and then I think, how can I connect this to other people? So my voice comes into play, my tone of speech comes into play. The way that I talk is huge. My hand motions are huge. In one of the poems that I performed with Drunken Owl, I actually acted it out a little bit. And I think that, and I got really good feedback on that,
Hmm,
where it was monsters lurking within mirrors. And so I pretended that there was, thanks to Kevin again, that there was a mirror that I was actually looking at. Um, and just that act of pointing to this imaginary mirror connected with so many people. Um, and I think that that allowed them to really see what I was feeling. And so there's this performance aspect that comes into play when you're doing it for other people that takes something that was once for me and it turns it into something that can be beautiful and something that can be really well connected to.
that's phenomenal. That's amazing. Now, um, so you're literally connecting like drama, acting, and everything else with that whole thing as you're now, do you read it through as you're acting? Do you pause? Like, how does that work? Like, how do you do like the acting part and then also share your poem as well?
Yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand. So there are strategic pauses. Typically those are whenever a stanza occurs.
Hmm.
That's a good pause. But there are pauses where sometimes poems call for me to talk more naturally. So
Hmm.
there's a poem that I'm doing about love that just calls for me to talk to you like I'm talking to a friend. It doesn't call for this big performance aspect. It calls for more of a personal performance. And then there's poems like Monsters Lurking Within Mirrors that call for this bigger performance aspect that um, I kind of pause strategically throughout the performance and throughout the poems to let certain lines sink in. So there's a line um, that simply says, I know my worth. And it is part of a stanza, but that line is so important to the story because the whole poem is about me not knowing my worth and not knowing who I am and that I'm worth anything. So when I get to that point, I pause and I usually hear a or an ah or snaps because people either connect to it or they think, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible that she's gotten to
Right.
that point." Um, and so I just take some really strategic pauses, and I allow myself to act in certain strategic places as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, how does this also differ? So, how does the poetry and your writing differ from, let's say, people like myself that I write songs? So, how does that difference? Or is there a difference?
I think that songs are poetry.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so um I think it's just another form of poetry, and so I absolutely love songwriting. I've written a couple songs. I have not done the musical part of that, so I usually refer or defer to my cousin who's brilliant and does songwriting, um, or people that do songwriting for me to do the musical part. Um, but I think that songs are just a form of poetry, and so I think it's really, really beautiful when people are able to write words that connect with people because that's what songs do. They connect with people. Um, and then take that and put music to that. I think that's another skill set that I don't have.
Hmm.
But so many people do. And I think it's really, really beautiful when something that is written is able to come out in such a musical way because a lot of people connect to music and a lot of people are able
Yeah.
to sing along with
Mhm.
music.
Yes.
And singing usually helps memory. And so they memorize what could be a really powerful song or even just a fun song um, a lot more quickly than they do with something that's written or spoken.
Now, I'm curious. Here's a question, and I didn't pre-prepare you for this, so I apologize ahead of time if I'm catching you off guard.
That's
But
okay.
do you have one you would like to share with the audience that you have written?
Like a poem?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it is about 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Mm, go. Yes. Because when you get done, I'm actually going to share something that I wrote.
Ooh, I love it.
Hmm.
Let me pull it up just in case, but I have it memorized.
That's what I was, when you saw me kind of fumbling around with some papers, that's what I was doing. I was looking for something for me to share with
Yeah.
you because it was just a thought that came into my mind.
So this one I've mentioned it a couple times is called Monsters Lurking Within Mirrors.
Yes. Yes. Please share that one because it's so far famous here.
Yeah. So it starts, I grew up afraid of mirrors, of the monsters that lurked on the other side, an angel of music beckoning me down to the pits of darkness 7. That's how old I was when I learned I could no longer stare at my reflection. That the girl waiting on the other side was not the image I wanted to see, too fat, too ugly, too empty. Eyes like the darkness you can only get out at sea. I waited for the twinkle of a star, but none appeared. 13. The age at which a boy's hands roamed without consent down my skin, and a fight inside longed to begin. But when the mirror called, all I could see was a girl so broken. It would take a miracle to put her back together again.
Mm.
So the denial of food became my best friend. and the mirror a tool just to check in on the weight I'd constantly hoped I'd lost, a symbol of my value, or so I thought. 28. I looked into the mirror for what I believed was the last time. Daring a glance at my aging skin, dark shadows pool under my eyes, a death found within, I shudder. I try to convince myself that I like what I see, that there's no part of me that is worth any less than that of my neighbor, that my worth isn't tied to what I see in the mirror, that the angel of darkness can wait for things to get clearer, for the light in her eyes to return. If only someone could hear her. I say goodbye to the girl in the mirror. 31. After years of awaiting, I dare a glance, if only just to give myself a chance to see what my reflection has become. A woman stares back. The same girl who thought she was too fat, who thought she lost ownership of her body and yearned to get it back, who thought she said goodbye, never to be seen again. She smiles. From ear to ear, a grin so wide it could be the length span of an eagle's wings. The twinkle in her eyes begins to take over. For the girl staring back at me knows her worth, that she is unique, only one on this earth, that no one can take her power away, that it doesn't matter how much you weigh. Life is so much more than what she had thought, that she's proud of herself for how hard she fought to put herself back together again. I look once more and I see things clearer, for at 31, I'm no longer afraid of the mirror.
Mm. Wow. I actually felt the weight of that, and the way you recited that as well is just it was very, I want to say artful, but I guess the proper way of saying it is artistic.
Mm, thank you.
Um, you're welcome. That was artistic, inspiring. You can feel the emotions, you can feel the weight of that. I like how you added in your ages as you kind of continue to grow, and I like how you added that in.
Yeah. I felt like there were certain points where the mirror was kind of calling me, and there were certain points that stuck out to me with this story of the mirror, and so I felt like the ages were really important.
That's just amazing. I'd like to share one of mine that I've written.
Yeah.
This one, so I've written many of songs, and this one I actually did a while back, kind of translate it into some music because I do music as well. So this is not just a podcast studio. I actually have, this, I use this actually as a singing mic, and then I have a guitar that plugs into my system, and then I use GarageBand to kind of do my amateur um from the garage, if you will, recordings and stuff. And this particular song, it's named Boundaries. And I wrote this quite a few years ago. I wrote this 14, yeah, the date says January 25th, 2010. Um, this was inspired by the movie series Twilight. So if you've ever seen Twilight,
Hmm.
okay, so you're going to resonate with this. So if you've seen that movie, you're definitely going to resonate with this. So it's called Boundaries. And so here we go. Boundaries, a limitful thought. Boundaries, the point to stop. Boundaries, the point where battles are fought. The point where adrenaline takes you on. The point where the will to conquer takes over more. A line that is drawn between two wills to fight, beating, crushing, smashing till night. The point of limit becomes the point of challenge. Two wills crash, two wills locked on winning, two wills fight to the finishing. One can only understand the depths of thought at the boundary point of the land. Anger, determination, rage fill the air. One would smell it through the blood on the ground. A battle, a fight that would win all. A battle where one would fall. Like wolves fighting, over their victory prey, there the victory lays. The victors enjoy their banquet, for now they have made it.
Mm, that's so good.
Thank you.
I loved that.
Thank you.
I love hearing other people's poetry and songs and what they come up with because it's so inspirational. And there were
Yeah.
so many good lines in there.
Thank you. What were some of your favorite lines?
I my memory doesn't serve me
Hey,
well.
that's okay. That's okay. Sorry to kind of like throw that at you.
No,
Um,
you're okay. I should have
um,
written them down, to be honest.
it's totally fine. So here's a little bit of my story. So quite a few years ago, I started songwriting, and I remember it was at the point where my guitar teacher, I'll never forget it. I've had this same guitar teacher for 20 years. Last year, before the holiday season, I believe it was, he finally retired, so I don't have him anymore. But I had him for 20 years. And I mainly I had him because not that I needed to learn how to play guitar. I had him because I wanted to break out of a pattern that I gotten myself into with guitar playing. I was playing the same stuff over and over, the same chords, the same strumming pattern, all that stuff. And so I wanted to break out of that. I never knew that when I got him as a guitar teacher that I would have him for 20 years. For 20 years we met once a week for the most part. And he began by taking me through music theory. And he taught me music theory in a way I've never understood it before. He taught it in a very understandable way. And then I remember the day he gave me this blueprint sheet. Here's all here's all the chords that are in G. Here's all the chords that are in C. Here's all the notes that are in this one and that one. And he's like, for example, he took like the key, not chord, the key of C. And he told me, he's like, all the notes, all the keys that are in the key of C. So you've got G, you've got E, you've got all those. He says, as long as you stay within that, you can make those in any combination you want. And for some odd reason, it just put a light bulb off in my head. Oh, so I don't have to go in order. I can play those in any order as long as I stay in that key. And he's like, yes. And so that's where I began having aha moments and I began my songwriting career because I was like, he just gave me a blueprint. So, and I can do anything I want as long as I stay here. And so that's where I started writing because I got inspired by that. But then here's the next step that he took. So when I got comfortable with that, he told me, he's like, now that you know this stuff, and you're familiar with it and you know the keys and how to stay in the keys and all the other things. It's all now that you know the rules, you can break them. He's like, as long as it sounds good, you don't have to stay in the key of C. You can pull from other keys if it works. And so that became an even more inspiration for me because I love to break rules and I love to find hacks. So I was always finding a way to do rule breakers in my songs and different things like that. So that's kind of like the interesting story on how I started writing. And in the very beginning, I remember I was very frustrated that I was having a hard time rhyming.
Mm.
And I worked on developing that skill, and pretty soon it became natural. Now it's pretty rare for me to write something without rhyming. And so that was also part of the journey. Now it's been a while, excuse me, since I've written anything, but I do have a whole plethora of stuff that I've written. Some I've turned into music, others are just still sitting there on the side. But that's kind of my story on writing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love hearing other people's stories.
Mm.
And I think that 20 years is a long time, so that must have been really, really beneficial for you.
Yeah, it has. I was disappointed when he retired, but I was kind of like, yeah, it's time. You need to retire, buddy. He finally found his soulmate and she kind of
Mm,
swept him off on, behind the scenes. And that was around the time that he decided to retire. Um, And so I can't blame him for that. And he's probably the happiest that I've ever seen him. He's been through two different relationships since I've been with him. This is the third that I've seen him with, and I've never seen him so happy and head over heels. So I was happy for him on that aspect. But I was sad to let him go because it became the norm for me. Like every week, Wednesday night, guitar lesson and we'd always be working on some kind of new project and stuff. And I remember, I would often want to make songs just simple, guitar and then maybe some other sound in the back. And he was the one, he's like, nope, we need to throw this in there and you need to do this for your interlude. And I'm hearing an electric guitar over here and I'm hearing this over here. And I'm just kind of, oftentimes I'm like, I just wanted this to be a simple song. But he's like, and I would share that with them too. And he's like, you can't blame me. He's like, you know me. And I'm like, yes, I do know you. So lots of really good memories. There's another question though I want to ask you. So
Mhm.
within that whole story, there are many people that are intimidated by poetry. What would you say to somebody who thinks they can't write poetry?
That's a really good question. I think everybody can write poetry. And the thing I would say first is that there isn't one correct style of poetry. There isn't, you don't have to rhyme if you don't want
Mm,
to. Um, you can just get words down on paper. You can break up words and sentences into different lines. Um, or you can just free form, let your thoughts flow and let that all come out on paper and create a poem from that.
mm,
I think that there are so many ways to start writing
yeah.
that don't let the thought of, oh my gosh, I can't write this
Oh,
amazing, beautiful poem
right.
stop you. Because
Gonna
if you
shit.
want to rhyme, for example, there are so many rhyming websites where just write a line, look up the end of the
I didn't
word
know they
for that
had
last
those.
word. Yeah, and then look up what rhymes with that word, and you can usually create another line from there. Um, and if you don't want to rhyme, then don't, because so many poems don't rhyme. And I think that there are so many different ways that people can just write and get the thoughts out on paper. Um, and you would be surprised what you can come up with.
That's amazing. That's a really, really, really good point. Now, how can poetry be a tool for self-discovery and personal growth?
I think the reflection part is really um, what can help with self-discovery and personal growth. I think getting all of your thoughts out on paper, writing these poems is one thing. I
Hmm.
think looking back on those poems can really help you self-discover. I
Yeah.
found that in my own journey where I looked back on poems that I had written in the past when I was more sad and more depressed and thought, oh my gosh, this is specifically what I was struggling with, or this is what I need to overcome, or I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore. And then the personal growth aspect of it comes into play when you're looking back on these poems and thinking, okay, maybe I've learned something about myself when I wrote this poem.
Mm.
Or maybe
Mhm.
I've learned something about myself when I look back on this poem. That helped me in my growth journey, in my personal growth journey. Um, I know for myself, it with both self-discovery and personal growth, I look back on my poems and thought, this is where I need to grow from, or this is where I need to work on with my relationship with my grandfather. I didn't understand that that was such a huge part of my life because when he passed, I just kind of moved on. I didn't allow myself to grieve. And it wasn't until I started writing poetry that I realized when all of these poems started coming out about the loss of my grandfather that, oh my gosh, maybe this was a really big deal and maybe
Mm.
I deserve to cope with that and to work through that a lot more. But it wasn't until I started writing that I actually realized that.
Wow. Wow. Um, Before we wrap up here, I want to share just one more. The reason why I'm
Yeah.
sharing this one is because this is one of the first ones that I wrote. So it's not the first one, but it's when I first started writing. So you're going to probably hear a difference between the one I shared with you and this one. So this one's kind of short. It's called Illusionist, and I actually was inspired by the title through it was a movie that I saw a while back ago called Illusionist. And I don't remember much about the movie, but I was inspired that evening and I wrote a song about it. So here it is. You live in an illusionist world. You're enticed, drawn by it. You're so deceived. You just can't believe what you see. Can't you see the tricks aren't real? You're being fooled. Guilt, pain, and folly will be your end. He's tricked you again. Damnation will be your end. It's a maze of deception. You're drawn into it. The art of attraction. You are trapped by it. Enticed, you're caught by it. Caught in your own web. You shake the hand of Satan, and now your life is brought to an end.
I'm curious what inspired that.
Um, at the time, I don't know. There's there's a lot of ones that I wrote back then that I kind of wrote with certain people in mind. So I lived in Temecula, which is about 40 minutes north from here. And I
Mm.
had my own house and I would rent rooms to friends and people that I knew and different things like that for a while. And it was a fun time. But there were some people that were on my property that claimed to be one thing and their example was a completely different thing. So a lot
Mm.
of there are a lot of songs that I wrote back then kind of speaking into that. So this probably was also inspired by that as well. So that's kind of probably where some of that came from.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So if somebody wanted to start writing and to start diving into poetry or writing in general, what are 3 to 5 things that you can tell that particular person to get them started?
Um, Great question. Buy a notebook. It seems really simple,
Hmm.
but buy something that you can put all of your poetry into, because you're going to want to keep track of what you've created. I think it's really easy to just kind of write down on random pieces of paper or um, random spots, and then you can't keep track of everything that you've created. And I think it's really important to do that. Um, there was another thought I had. It'll come back to me, but
Okay.
um, right. So buy a notebook. Um, Refresh my memory on the question. I'm so sorry.
So if somebody wanted to start writing poetry or writing in general, what are 3 to 5 things that you could tell them to help them get started?
Yes. Um, so buy a notebook, and then there are a lot of poetry books out there that help you kind of get started with poetry. A lot of them are really great at explaining different types of poetry. Um, they might give you ideas that you can spark
Hmm.
from in terms of what connects with you most. Maybe haikus are where your poetry lies. Maybe it's more free form. Maybe it's more rhyming. Maybe it's acrostics. There are so many different avenues to poetry that connect with different people in different ways. Um, and then don't hesitate. Um, it really is one of these things where if you just start writing, you will get better over time.
I can
Um,
attest to that for sure.
yeah. And so you got to start somewhere, and don't throw away poems that you feel like aren't good enough. Keep those poems because you'll see your journey over time and you'll see your growth over time.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and I think that they deserve to be seen just as much as the ones that you're really, really proud of. Um, so yeah, I think those are kind of the that in a nutshell.
Amazing, amazing. So, what's the best? I mean, I know you shared with me your links and everything, but I want you to be able to share the best ways for people can get in, where people can get in touch with you or contact with you.
Yeah. Instagram is a really good way. Kaitlyn P. DeMeyere. Um, There also, I own a business called PIR Studios. It is a business that I kind of think of as a production company. It hosts my podcast, Recovery Isn't Linear, and it also aims to do events for the community. So poetry events for the
Hmm.
community. We have one coming up in March. Um, and I'm super excited about it. But on that website, www.pirstudios.com, there is a contact me page. It goes straight to my email, um, and or contact us page.
Hmm.
And that is a really good way to get in touch with me if you have anything that you want to share.
Awesome, awesome. And so that website, you guys, just in case anybody might just be driving and they don't, they can't see the screen or whatever. So that website is www.p as in Paul, I as in ill, R as in Ralph, studios, spelled like it sounds, .com/connect dash us. So it's not connect us, one word, it's connect dash us.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kaitlyn, for coming on the show and just being willing to be open and vulnerable. I really, really appreciate it. And before I wrap up this particular episode of Expert Interviews with Ken, to my audience out there listening, hey, this might be the first time you've seen me on a video. Maybe this is the first time you've landed on this channel and this is the first thing you've watched. My name is Ken Kleinberg, and I am a weight loss coach. I've lost 62 and a half pounds and I've kept it off for 7 years now, sustainably, all without a diet. And right now, I'm giving away my 3 secrets to help you break free from the sugar addictions, the hunger issues, the snacking issues, the emotional eating, lose that last 20 pounds, all of it, all in 3 phases with me. Number one, you will be equipped with an empowered mindset shift. Number two, you are going to be equipped to see past the lies of the industry and avoid the common pitfalls. And what I mean by industry, I'm talking about the food industry. And number three, you're going to be equipped to see past the marketing deceptions of this industry. They put it all over the packages. Many people are believing that something is healthy and it's really not. And I teach you how to see past all of that, all in 3 phases with me. And right now, that mini educational boot camp is going for only $97. It's been valued at $1,500. Those aren't my words. Those are words out of other people that I've given a sneak insider look on the boot camp and all it contains. I've had one person that told me that my boot camp is worth 1,000. I had another one that said it was worth 1,500. I am offering the whole package and the sessions with me for just $97. You got nothing to lose but those extra pounds. You got everything to gain in the right way. All right. So with that, you guys, thank you again, Kaitlyn. It's been a pleasure having you on today's show. Um, I love talking to another fellow writer. I don't think in our pre-interview I mentioned the fact that I myself am a writer, and I don't know why. I don't think it just came to me. I don't think it came to me at that time. So this kind of just popped out here. I was just like, oh, wait, you're a writer too. Why don't you share that stuff? So there you go. Anyhow, you guys have a great rest of your day and evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day you are listening. And I will talk to you guys on the next episode.